Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mimi Wolde-Johannes, and I serve as the Special Projects and Community Manager at the 74, a national K-12 education media nonprofit organization. I have the distinct honor to help facilitate this session entitled Mothers Stand Up, the Rising Voice of the Black Mother. As we know all too well, the school system often asks Black and Brown families to be patient when it comes to resolving educational inequities because we're in a pandemic, or there's not enough money, or frankly, any other reason that conveniently comes to mind. And for years, these families have been told by our privileged decision makers to give us time. How many years are Black and Brown communities going to have to hear that? Well, these Black mamas in front of you have refused to accept the status quo and are actively leading organizing efforts in their respective communities to ensure that all of our scholars have access to high quality educational opportunities. Black women have been the backbone of community organizing work, and it's evident that when they lead, they care for the communities at large, not just themselves. And like the OG Black women organizers, Fannie Lou Hamer and Polly Williams, who were relentless despite the fact that they consistently received pushback from their own parties or were often pushed out or turned away from, these Black mamas have also displayed an immense amount of tenacity in this movement for educational justice. Today, we're here to discuss the power and agency of the Black mother, and joining me are these phenomenal and unapologetically Black women. I know my introductions won't certainly do them justice, so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and what grounds them in this work. Alicia, let's start with you, and let's go ahead and try and keep our responses 1 to 2 minutes if possible.
So Mimi, thank you for having me. I am fired up just by that introduction, and I got goosebumps because I thought about my own Black mama. It is her fault that I have become the advocate for children. It started when I was 14. Actually, it started when I was in elementary school, when she and my father decided to put me in a minority to majority program for elementary school. And so they've been practicing school choice all of my life. The second huge thing that my mom did was drag me to the NAACP meeting, which is where my activism started at the age of 14. And so I am a life member of the NAACP, a former state legislator from Georgia, elected at the age of 23, served 6 terms. I spent a lot of time focused on education. I left the legislature and then went into education and served as a superintendent of a charter school network in the Metro Atlanta area. And so now I am an entrepreneur and a keynote speaker, and continuing to use my voice for all children, including my own 13-year-old daughter, Layla.
Thank you so much for being here, Alicia. Ashley, let's turn it over to you.
Hello, everybody. I'm excited too, Alicia, to have this conversation with you all today. My name is Ashley Verdin. I'm an Indianapolis, Indiana native, and what keeps me grounded in this work and keeps me going is just my own personal story as well. I'm an Indianapolis public school graduate, and I feel like they failed me, and I don't want my kids to grow up and have this same feeling, wake up 34 years old and say, wow, like my school failed me. And so I'm in this fight to switch the narrative for our kids. And I'm so excited I've just recently founded an organization called Education Freestyle, where we'll be working together to build community so that we can leverage our social capital and willpower together to switch this narrative for our kids.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today. And let's go ahead and take it over to Lakeisha.
Yes, hey, I guess it's still good morning over here. I am zooming in from Oakland, California, and excited to be on this panel with these amazing women. I'm the co-founder, CEO of the Oakland Reach, but most importantly, I'm a mom of 3. My oldest is on her way to college, right? And so this means so much to me during this time, because, you know, what grounds me in this work is I got a good education, but I needed, the circumstances had to be right. You know, my mom was a single mom. I mean, my family's from Jim Crow, South Mississippi, right? So my grandmother dropped out of high school when she was in the 9th grade. So there's nothing about the beginnings of my story that should have me had graduated with a master's degree, right? But it truly is because somewhere my mama made a decision that she was going to make sure that I was in the best schools. And the pathways that that's opened for me in my life, I just had to make sure it was my responsibility to make sure that folks that look like me, come from the communities I come from, right? Try to have more Lakeishas go to college, that I'm like helping to lead and collectively lead this work to make sure that happens.
Beautiful. Thank you again for joining us today. And last but not least, Deirdre, let's go ahead and get you started.
Hi, thank you all so much for allowing me. I feel so humbled to be on this panel with all of these powerful Black women. My name is Deirdre Reed. I am a partner at TNTP on our policy and advocacy team. But just like Lakeisha, I come to this work really from the standpoint of being a Black mother. Like the injustices that I have seen across my lifetime around not only just education, but just in the world. Like I am so steeped in this idea of fairness. And I just remember being in high school and seeing, you know, inequitable treatment of people. And I would stop and say, that's not fair. What are we going to do about it? And so that the idea that, and I will ground it in my grandmother, the idea that we have the power inside of us to be able to make change, and that change isn't rooted in individualism. So it is not good enough for me alone to overcome a thing, but that I don't get to overcome a thing and everybody else doesn't. That idea of fairness and collectivism and the village is so rooted in my lived experience about how I think about, you know, social justice and equity, and in particular, where we are in the fight for our children and their educational outcomes. So I just thank y'all for being here, and I look forward to us getting into this conversation.
Thank you again for joining us. So let's go ahead and dive in. Lakeisha, my question for you right now is, so the Oakland Reach has convened together on behalf of Oakland families to advocate for children who are most often left behind, to actually have an opportunity and a pathway to a higher, better quality educational option. In efforts of closing the growing opportunity gap amidst the pandemic, the Oakland Reach stepped up to create a virtual hub, supporting parents to be leaders and advocates for their children's learning and providing high quality instruction. What was the impetus for developing the virtual hub? And can you tell us a little bit more about some of the strengths and challenges associated with the platform?
Yes, Mimi, I'm excited to share. So, you know, when COVID hit, our families lost connection with their teachers. Many did not have the technology infrastructure in their homes to even transition to distance learning, right? And then we had like conversations on the local and national level, which included like a lot of like lamenting about the conditions of Black and Brown. It was a lot of like, oh no, these poor Black and Brown kids, it's just gonna get worse, right? And so it became really clear sitting at the kitchen table, hey, no one's coming to save us, right? This is a moment in time for us to take something that is a huge challenge, right? And turn into an opportunity, because prior to COVID hitting, less than 30% of Black and Brown kids were reading on grade level in Oakland. Heck, less than 50% of all kids in Oakland were reading on grade level. Contentious political fights, right, between types of schools and the district and the teachers union, all with our kids and families as the collateral damage in the middle, right? So when COVID hit, instead of seeing it as a doom and gloom, we saw this as an opportunity to seize the education of our babies, right? And build the model that we knew would serve them, right? And so how we did that was we built a virtual hub. And this virtual family hub was essentially, and is essentially, because it's still running, an integration of sort of the academic and socioeconomic aspirations and needs of families. So the hub has an academic component. So like in our summer hub, our kids went to school 5 days a week. They were online 4 hours a day. They had live instructors. 85% of those teachers were teachers of color. A lot of our students don't get to see themselves reflected in their teachers, right? Every family had a family liaison. You know, I heard one of the moms on the panel before talking about like, who's going to support me through this transition? So your family liaison is almost like your educational social worker, right? They either helping you get on email or helping talk you off the ledge, because it's hard on a day-to-day basis to manage this at home. And we have families losing jobs and trying to put groceries in the refrigerator. So having that family liaison is key. We made sure every single family had computers, the kids had computers, that the families had hotspots and that connection. And at the close of our first phase of the hub, families who completed the hub received a stipend up to $500, right? Because that was our way of also just really trying to tackle and consider the socioeconomic just burdens that our families were feeling at the time. What I think is amazing about what we did as a group of parents and as an advocacy org stepping into building an educational model for our kids is at the close of those 5 weeks, 60% of our kindergarten through second grade students went up 2 or more reading levels on the district. Okay, can we snap on that? I just want to repeat that. 60% went up 2 or more reading levels on the district-wide reading assessment. 30% went up 3 or more, right? So please don't tell us our babies can't read. Please don't tell us it's hard for our babies to read. When the mamas take control, when the mamas are designing and building, all of a sudden our babies can read. And as we speak to you today, we started off with 200 students, district and charter students in the hub. And now we have, over 300 or so students and families. And building, and what we learned, the strength of the hub is the self-determination and what feels like liberation for our families. Our families are getting bougie now is what we call it, right? Our families are starting to say like, oh, this is what it feels like to get great high quality instruction that's centered in the African-American experience or the Latino experience, right? This is what it means for my baby to be able to take creative writing or cooking classes, right? Like we are exposing our families to what's possible, right? And education, because everything that they've seen through history, through their own lived experiences, has never shown them that. And I will tell you that the strength of that hub, besides delivering on that promise, has got our families being like, we don't want to go back to that. We're good. We don't want to go back to that. And I would just say, I think I would just sort of wrap up is just to say that the challenge is making sure that our families don't have to go back to something that's not working. That's really the biggest challenge. You're going to have challenges building a hub. You're going to have challenges building anything innovative. But I will tell you that the biggest challenge is making sure that our families can continue to like operate in a sense of building community and self-determination that we haven't seen and experienced in a really long time.
Thank you for that, Lakeisha. And as a quick follow-up, what is the future for the virtual hub?
Sorry about that. So I think I said it, right? We built this hub. Our hub launched in June, right? We started designing it in March of last year, right when COVID hit, right? But we launched it in June. So our families have had 8 months of just like community and just, we're working with Kaya Henderson and Reconstruction. And it's just amazing. So the future of the hub is this has to expand. We would like to see this replicated across the state of California, right? Which is why we're partly in this lawsuit. We are actually in a lawsuit against the state of California right now, one-of-a-kind lawsuit. But we would also like to see this replicated across the country. Because Ashley, when I was listening to your story earlier, it's like my heart ached because I feel like we're so behind. It's like we're so behind in where we need to be to really make sure to systemically upend what Black and Brown families need. So the future of the hub is about replication and it's about expansion. We are on the verge of something. This pandemic has been hard in many ways, but it has also opened the doors for a level of liberation around education for our people that I haven't seen in my lifetime. And I don't think my mama's seen in hers.
Yeah, that's absolutely inspirational. And I love that you all are seizing the opportunity. So Ashley, let's go ahead and I want to pivot to you really quickly. So throughout your experience of community building with indie families, what does it look like for parents to have a meaningful voice in how decisions are being made in education?
They need to stop treating our kids as a hustle and work with us so that school choice is real. I know the school that my kids attend now is not the school that I chose for them before COVID hit. Since COVID hit, we have struggled tremendously to keep up with virtual learning. Me and my 3 kids have struggled tremendously to the point where I wanted to homeschool them, but I didn't have the resources in order to do that. I wanted to switch their schools, but we don't have transportation right now. So we're kind of stuck with the schools within our neighborhood that are either walkable or that I can get transportation. And it's just not fair. It's not fair for my kids and it's not fair for me. I've even had to take a step back from working. So there was just this piece of me, like, how am I going to provide for my children? How am I going to mentally, if I could just be vulnerable and transparent, I just wasn't there. I wasn't there. I couldn't take it anymore. I was about to lose it, honestly. And so to hear stories about what Lakeisha is doing in Oakland, yes, please, let's bring that here. Please, like, I have a community of support, but they're all sending their kids to different schools. And if you're like Indy, like, everybody's using different platforms. So how can we really come together to talk about what to do and we can best support our children? So to have something like a virtual hub, a family liaison, somebody that's going to help walk me through it, because sometimes, some days, like you said, I need to be talked off a ledge because I can't carry the weight of all of these unrealistic expectations from these funding-driven institutions, these schools the funding-driven schools. Like, it's mind-blowing that we're continuing to operate that way in such in a field that should be strictly people-driven. So that's my biggest thing. Again, I just want to say, stop treating our kids as a hustle and work with us so that we can make school choice real for our families.
Thank you for being so vulnerable. I know it's not easy talking about personal experiences all the time, but I just want you to know that you do have the support and you do have, folks who are going to be willing to come and root for you in whatever endeavor you end up doing in Indy. Deirdre, let's go ahead and pivot to you. So I know that your approach to upending systemic educational inequities is rooted in community organizing. So you do a lot of work with faith-based institutions and a lot of work, of course, with Black and Brown mamas. Given the movement for Black lives and the role that women of color played in this last electoral cycle, how should education reformers look to engage this set of powerful, impacted people?
So there's a twofer in that to me. There's one is like, how should ed reformers engage? And then also, how should we as Black and Brown mamas embrace the fact that we are powerful? That if you think about this last electoral season, not only did Black and Brown mamas, and Black mamas in particular, show up in this election, we didn't just vote, we outvoted white men in this election. And we didn't just outvote white men in this election, we actually went into, what my grandma would say, each one teach one, each one teach, grab one, 5. We literally got other people out to the polls. And we did it, one, in like, across socioeconomic barriers, across cultural, like subcultural barriers. I can see one of my girlfriends in my head, like, she is, organizing folks from her very privileged, African-American privileged space, right? Her, as a part of the Divine Nine. And then also in Georgia, you saw pole strippers that were organizing. They said, get your booties to the polls. We are mamas and we are also, we also work in this industry. And they said, not this poll, that poll. And they use their voice and their platform to be able to get other people out to vote. And so, like, if we have that kind of power electorally, how do we take that power and come up with a platform for ourselves as it relates to our babies? You know what I'm saying? Like like when I think about the way in which we talk about elections and the electoral cycle, it is usually, as Black folks, it is usually from the space of history. We say our people died so that you can vote. And I need us to start to think of it around our self-interest. I'm voting because I have a set of issues that I want you to come back and deal with. And education is a new frontier for those issues. And so when I think about the movement for Black lives and the policing of Black and brown bodies, when I think about what my sister Ashley said, she said, you know, we say they commoditize our Black bodies in education. Like there is a number around that, around our little Black boys and our little Black girls' booties being in those seats, either in person or virtually. It's somewhere between $11,000 and $15,000. And if they are not there, to Sister Lakeisha's point, that district does not get paid that money. And so how are we leveraging, not, you know, just belaboring and, you know, like, hey, take my kid, but like, how are we leveraging the power that without your child in that seat, no one gets paid? And so I will withhold myself from that seat. That's called a boycott. I will withhold my child from that seat until the things that I want to see happen in and outside of school is happening. And I feel like, to Lakeisha's point, Sister Lakeisha's point, we have this, not in my lifetime have I been so inspired and hopeful that we can do that. We can do that.
And just as a quick follow-up, what is one piece of advice that you have for mamas as they begin to evaluate their child's educational experience before and, of course, in the post-pandemic world?
Go for it. I think that push, I think of us as like we're moms, right? And so if, you know, as moms, we have been through the birthing process. And so there's a place when something is being birthed that the doctor or the midwife or the doula says, push. We're at that point. We're at the precipice of something right now. And so we need to push through. We need to come together. So like not in the sense of like just your own individual child, but in the sense of the collective. We need to come together and say, what are the three things, the three ways we want to reimagine schools? Do we want to have them on our own? Do we want to own them? Do we want to work? You know, like what does choice mean for us? What does building out the infrastructure of education mean for us? And then we need to go back to those same folks that we elected, and we need to have them to listen to us, because we have the power.
So glad you mentioned that elected, going back to the elected folks piece. And Alicia, I want to take this question to you. So if you all didn't know, Alicia is also an author. And in your book, Alicia, No Apologies, Powerful Lessons in Life, Love, and Politics, you actually recount your time challenging the status quo during your tenure in the Georgia House of Representatives. So while election season might be over for now, how can parent organizing groups continue to challenge the status quo in education and hold our elected officials and civic organization or community leaders accountable for providing equitable educational opportunities moving forward?
Whew, so much to say. First of all, you mamas on this panel are absolutely incredible. I think Ashley said it best. We know what is best for our children. And when you take what Ashley said with what Deirdre said about having power and using it and pushing through, that's how you continue to get what you need through the legislative, the political, the electoral processes. And so I won't even go into that story that you were talking about in my book, but it was a moment where, you know, Fannie Lou Hamer came into my spirit, and I was sick and tired of being sick and tired, and challenged the Speaker of the House and the status quo. And at times we need to do that. And I think for Black mamas in particular, we need to decide that we're not satisfied with the status quo, with what they say our schools need to look like, how they deliver an education to our students based on our zip code or anything else. We've got to decide, as Lakeisha has been doing in Oakland, which I'm just blown away, because we know what's best for our children, we can design systems that work for our children. I'm not saying I need to go and teach the cooking class, because I don't cook over here, but I don't have to do some of the classes that they're doing, but I know what my child needs. I know my daughter who's 13, I know she's thriving more in this virtual environment. So what kinds of options do I really have? And instead of sitting here saying, well, I only have this one school to choose from. No, what I have is the option to choose what's best for my child. What is the environment? What does it look like? What time are her classes? How is she going to get the delivery of classes? And so how do you do that? You decide that you got to do more than just vote. We did an amazing job nationally and certainly in Georgia turning out to vote. And so we know what our power is in terms of getting people in office. But the job just started when you went to the polls. The next part of the job is to have relationships with those elected officials. I'm not saying going up there, rolling your neck, telling them what they gonna do, what they not gonna do. I'm saying have a relationship, sit down with them and explain to them, actually, you would be a powerful voice going to the state legislature or the school board, talking to elected officials face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and sharing with them what your experience has been as a Black mama trying to navigate school for 3 children without transportation. And talking to them about what you need and how it's not about a dollar bill, as we've been talking about, but it's really about having the laws in place, the structures in place, so that we can create schools and options that are best for our children. And so it's having relationships, it's sending letters, it's paying attention when session is in. Most states in this country, the legislative session has started for 2021. So you need to be paying attention to the session. You can watch virtually. Go virtually to the education committee meetings, sign up to speak. When I was in the legislature, I had 56,000 constituents. But if I had 10 emails from parents, I was paying attention, because there are so few people that engage in this process that when people take the time to participate in the process, your voice is more powerful than you could ever imagine. So build that relationship, pay attention to those meetings, have your voice heard, and continue to engage in the process by going to those meetings. Yes, by participating in elections and being clear, again, that you don't have to accept the status quo, that there is power in numbers. You can organize. There are groups that are already in existence who are doing this work, and what it will take is your organizing and getting involved. The last thing I want to mention real quick, I do some work with the National Coalition for Public School Options. On the website, there is a national poll that we conducted of 1,000 Black parents across this country. You would be blown away by the numbers. Everything from 90% of parents want to see Black history and Black culture taught in public schools. Hello. You will see information about how Black parents feel about school choice, everything from charters to tax credit scholarships, even the racism that students experience in public schools. And so I want people to go and check out that survey, but what it will do is empower us. We have information behind us. The people who are watching this panel, the mama, the daddy who's frustrated and trying to figure out the system, we have the data behind us. It's not just your feeling and your individual experience. There are thousands and hundreds of thousands of parents who are having these same experiences as you. And what it takes is information and organization and engaging in the process. And we can create the change we want to see.
Thank you all so much for indulging me in that question and in this entire conversation. It is truly an honor to be a part of this liberating and just spirit-filling conversation with you all, ladies. I know it's a lot to ask of you. You all have so many things that you're balancing, and on top of being a mother at that. And so just thank you again for everything that you're doing. We will continue to have this conversation. It's not going to end here. This is just the very beginning, as I like to say. And hopefully you all can engage in what these women are doing in their respective regions. And of course, you all can engage at the 74. We do have national coverage of some of these issues that were presented here today. So with that, I will go ahead and close out. Thank you all again, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.